Good morning, everyone. Right now it is 7:30 in the morning. All right, today we'll be starting with the speaking, and today's topic is photographs for part one. Part two, the topic is describe a day when you thought the weather was perfect, and part three, types of weather, related to part two. Okay, today again, I would like to use the technique, the SWABSWI strategy, and which stands for since, when, although, because, so, which, and if. And believe me, if you get used to these words, right, it will help you to get around 6.5 very easily, right? So the speaking that we are doing today, it is how you can get around 6.0 to 6.5. So even though if you have a great pronunciation, if you don't use these technique, right, or if you don't use these strategy, then some people might misunderstand why did I get like 5.5, 5.0, and it is because you didn't use these, because these are very important words for you to speak in varieties of way. So depending on how you use these words, the sentence may sound different. Then the examiner may think he can use his language in different ways. So it is pretty much important to use these ways. So we have to get used to using these words, all right? Okay, all right. The first question is what type of photos do you like taking? All right. And also I like to, if you're about to say no, right, about negative, just for a reminder, right? You can say actually, to be honest, or frankly speaking. All right, all these words represents right before you're about to say something negative or something you don't like. So these words are pretty much important when we use it, and please don't use them habitually. Most of the students of mine use them very habitually. So even if it is not about to say something negative, they would just say habitually. So for example, actually, I like my dinner. Yes, right? It doesn't make any sense. So make sure when you're using these words, it is actually saying that you're about to say something negative. All right. Okay, so it says, what type of photos do you like taking? All right, so I can say, let me use one other word, right? Um, actually, I don't really like taking photos. All right, then here, right, what I'm going to use is since. Since I work almost 24/7, there are many other things more important than taking photos. That's how I answered this one. All right, what do you do with photos you take? And then here, I already said that I don't like taking photos, right? Then what I would, if I'm repeating my question, if I'm repeating my answer, then don't say the same thing again. It's better to say as I mentioned. So use the word as I mentioned. As I mentioned, I don't like taking photos. But if I had a chance to take one and keep it, I'd rather print it from the Photoshop and keep it in my album. All right, this is how I would answer. So just remember, as you're doing the speaking, right, just try to be natural as possible, as if you're sharing conversation. right? That'll be good enough for you to get around 6.0 or 6.5. When you visit other places, do you take photos or buy postcards? And then I would, talk about the past. In the past, whenever I traveled, I used to buy souvenirs. I forgot how to spell souvenirs. Is this the right spelling? Yes, right. It is the right spelling. I used to, sorry, wrong spelling for buy. I used to buy souvenirs instead of postcards or taking photos. And try not to be honest here. One of the things that students misunderstand is that they try to be too honest, but rather than being honest, try to speak what you know in English. That is my advice for you. Do you like people taking photos of you? Now, I'm about to say that I do not like people taking photos of me. So I'm going to use one of these words. Since I've already used actually, right? I'm going to say to be honest. I'm going to use to be honest this time. And I will use the word although and to be honest together. All right, so I'm going to start with although. Although many people keep their good memories by photos. To be honest, I don't like when someone takes the photo of me. Alright, so that's how I would start. Okay, next one is describe a day when you thought the weather was perfect. And these are the three questions: where you were on this day, what the weather was like on this day, and what you did during the day. Okay, and always, as usual, and explain why you thought the weather was perfect on this day. Here I'm going to start with, like always, I'd like to talk about. All right, so always start with these words. I think it is really good for you to get a head start, and then I'll talk about the weather. All right, so describe a day when you thought the weather was perfect. And really, it all depends. There's no proper answer for this one. So I would say I like to talk about the day when I went to a picnic. No, not picnic. I'll say field trip. Field trip while I was in high school. Okay, and then I will continue on. I used to attend an international school in South Korea. Even though the school was based on American standard academics, we always went on a field trip which was related to Korean tradition or culture. I remember. I remember when I went to this place called Insadong. Insadong, which was a famous place where they kept the Korean heritage. During that day, the weather was superb. All right, now the reason why I say superb, right? I was going to say very nice or it was very good. And if you look at some of my videos, right, although it is in Korean, I suggest them to use superb. Try to avoid the word very, right? So superb is another word that you can use instead of very. All right. So I say the weather was superb. Um, then since the month was in April, it was perfect. Okay, so I pretty much answer all this question, what the weather was like on this day and where you were on this day. Now, actually the main focus, right, here is based on like where we went and about the Korean background and those kind of thing. While they were asking what the weather was like, but you don't have to answer. Focus on this one. Just try to focus on what pops in your mind. So whatever pops in your mind, you have to speak that. Don't try to answer these questions. So because automatically, right? When you are trying to answer this one question, right? And as you are developing some ideas in your brain, automatically you are answering these questions. So don't really look at these. Just think about, just speak what your mind says. That is the most important thing. Many people get stuck here while they're trying to answer this. So my suggestion is, and these don't have to be in order. So my suggestion is, just speak. Don't focus on these three questions. What you should say. All right, just focus on this one thing, and as you're trying to speak for 2 minutes, these things will be said automatically. And while I was writing this, I didn't know that these were the three things. I didn't know that these were the three things as I was writing. And then basically, as I was writing, it was answering all these three things. All right, so don't focus on these three things. All right. Okay, all right. And then types of weather. All right, what types of weather do people in your country dislike most, and why is that? Okay, and then I would start most common, so you can say most of the people in my country hates summer. Um, because summer. Because many people, and like I told you, these don't have to be true. Because many people farm, farm and cultivate crops. Cultivate crops. Cultivate crops. And sometimes summer ruins the crops by the insects or by heavy rain. I made this up, so but doesn't really matter. Like I told you, it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be fact. It says most of the people in my country hate summer because many people farm and cultivate crops, and sometimes summer ruins the crops by the insects or by heavy rain. Okay, all right. Grammatically, it doesn't make any sense, but one of the criteria for the speaking part, right? They say as long as the examiner understands, right? It is okay. It is okay for them to make a slight grammatical mistake, right? So I'm not focusing on grammar. I'm focused more on whether the judge understands or not, whether the examiner understands or not. All right, what jobs can be affected by different weather conditions? And then, I'm about to say agriculture, all right? So I'm going to say, because it is the same thing that I just said, I'm going to say, like I mentioned. Like I mentioned, like I mentioned. I think, all right, and there's another way of saying I think. As you know, I'm using this word I think a lot. So another way of using I think, right? It's an idiom word. My take on this. So I would say my take on this is that agriculture would be the job that is most affected by the weather. As you know, depending how bad or how good the weather is, it can have an impact on how much it produces. Okay, all right. Are there any important festivals in your country that celebrate a season or type of weather? All right, then I would say, mm, I would say absolutely. Don't I and make sure you just don't say yes or no. All right, if you're about to say no, start with the word to be honest, or frankly speaking, or actually. And if you're about to say yes, don't just say yes. Say absolutely or definitely yes. All right, bring in some try to bring in some of those emphasis on those words. All right, so I'll say absolutely, absolutely. And then absolutely, there are uh, winter festival in the country where I live. During that festival, they sell many different kinds of soups and snacks. And then let me use one of those SWABSWI words. All right. Snacks, which can be one of the people's favorite. Yeah, this doesn't kind of make sense, but like I told you, we are focusing on speaking, not on whether it makes sense or not, all right? Okay, then let's start back from the beginning, okay? So, starting from the first question, what type of photos do you like taking? Actually, I don't really like taking photos. Since I work almost 24/7, there are many other things more important than taking photos. What do you do with photos you take? As I mentioned, I don't like taking photos, but if I had a chance to take one and keep it, I'd rather print I'd rather print it from the Photoshop and keep it in my album. When you visit other places, do you take photos or buy postcards? In the past, whenever I traveled, I used to buy souvenirs instead of postcards or taking photos. Do you like people taking photos of you? Although many people keep their good memories by photos, to be honest, I don't like when someone takes the photo of me. Part 2. So describe a day when you thought the weather was perfect. I'd like to talk about the day when I went to a field trip while I was in high school. I used to attend an international school in South Korea. Even though the school was based on American standard academics, we always went on a field trip which was related to Korean tradition or culture. I remember when I went to this place called Insadong, which was a famous place where they kept the Korean heritage. During that day, the weather was superb. Since the month was in April, it was perfect. Let me just give you some feedback here. Like I told you, right? Try to focus on speaking rather than giving the right answer. All right, so that is my feedback here. All right, types of weather. What types of weather do people in your country dislike most, and why is that? Most of the people in my country hate summer because many people farm and cultivate crops, and sometimes summer ruins the crops by the insects or by heavy rain. What jobs can be affected by different weather conditions and why? Like I mentioned, my take on this is that agriculture would be the job that is most affected by the weather. As you know, depending on how bad or how good the weather is, it can have an impact on how much it produces. Are there any important festivals in your country that celebrate a season or type of weather? Absolutely. There are winter festivals in the country where I live. During that festival, they sell many different kinds of soups and snacks, which can be one of the people's favorite. Okay, all right. So today, again, we talked about the SWABSWI strategy using since, when, although, because, so, which, and if. And when we are about to say no, right, we actually use these words. Actually, to be honest, frankly speaking, all right, and remember those things, okay? All right. So today we will finish here, and and I will come back with you with a much more varieties of ideas of how you can get 6.0 or 6.5. All right. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.